Thank you. So welcome to our October Board Curriculum Council meeting. As you saw on the agenda, or as you can see now, our list of curriculum and resource approvals and action items this month is limited to field trips. So we have 2 items related to field trips, bringing to the council the field trip applications that have come in this month, as well as our annual approval of the banked field trips at each band and grade level. So Ms. Saxa.
Thank you, Dr. McNeil. Okay, I thought it would be easiest if we started with the trips that we are requesting to add to the bank this time around. And I am not sure if Mrs. Hickey has them up there. I shouldn't say I'm not sure. Of course she does. Okay. The first item is a musical performance at the Chester County Courthouse. And that is where students have been asked to sing the national anthem, an event that's actually designed to teach young people about the voting process. So we're asking for approval for the music group here in grades 9 through 12 to go and perform at this particular event. And that sort of brings us to the next thing, which I want to explain, and then we can field any questions about both or either of the items. And that is the next request. We found upon review of the bank that at some grade levels, there were approvals for open band and strings performances, so that it was not necessary for a group to request application to bank a field trip every time they were asked to perform somewhere. Rather, it fell under the category of already open allowable strings performances or allowable band performances. This exists in the middle school banks, so 6, 7, and 8. And in sort of reviewing the remainder of the banks, I found that when it comes to 6 through 12, there are many events where our musical groups are invited to perform. And some of them are requested to be, or have been requested to add to the bank, and so they exist in the bank, but they were sort of one-time performances. So, an example, which is not a nice example, but there's where a group was asked to perform at a funeral, which is a wonderful thing. However, it doesn't need to necessarily be in the bank for that reason, because obviously they're not coming back to perform at that same event again. So would it be in the best interest of our musical performing groups if we had, similar to the open academic competition or the open university lecture series item, to have something where the items, the trips would still need to be approved, but they would already fall under the category of event open musical performance. And that would then include, rather than just middle school band and strings, it would also include 6 through 12, all musical groups, which would include the chorus, as well as the band and strings groups. So those are those 2 items. And then should I do the third, and then we'll take questions?
Discussion?
You want to discuss that first?
Around the, sorry, I didn't have my microphone on. Is there any discussion around Ms. Saxa's suggestion to have a bank category of open musical performances? So I assume silence is agreement? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll go to the final item on this request to be added to the bank. And this is the Pennsylvania State Thespian Conference. And as you can see, it is actually for students in grades 9 through 12 because it's a multi-grade course. It's Theater 1 and Theater 2 at the high school level. And this particular conference addresses many of the standards. And the dates that you can see that it's available are the dates of the conference. So it's necessary for the group to attend at this time because those are the dates that it is available. And therefore, we are requesting that this particular trip be added to the bank so that our students can attend. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So that brings us to the next item. And We were thankful to Mrs. Hickey for sending around the copy of the bank. I feel like I need to stand up and face the other direction. Not that it's not very exciting to look at the back of my head, but just a quick review of the request. We had at our last meeting discussed the fact that the bank is to be approved annually. And so this is our chance to take a look at the bank and ensure that it is still accomplishing the objectives which were intended. And so that's why everybody got a copy of the bank, and we wanted to field whatever questions there are about the bank and make sure that we felt comfortable approving again. So with that, as you know, there are many people in this room who has far more experience with these particular field trips than I do. So please, everyone, feel free to join in the conversation about the experience or the reasons behind a trip, if there is a question that pertains to it. The first thing I'd like to do is just remind everybody that we have several objectives in the policy of our field trips. And those objectives are to ensure that we are essentially enriching the experiences of our students in a way that is complementary to our academic program. So the question arose last time, and we'll start with this one, about our overseas trips. And I believe it was Mrs. Hurt-Simmons who brought up the idea that there might be a time when we need to cancel an overseas trip because of safety reasons. And we may even want to consider whether or not we want to approve these trips on a one-time only basis versus adding it to the bank. So with that question, we directed the idea and the comments to the policy committee, which did meet, and feel free to chime in if anybody was there at that meeting. But what was pointed out at the policy meeting were several items that were in the policy that really guarantee our ability to do just those things that we needed to do. In our policy that includes 121.9, and it includes information on foreign field trips. There actually is language that says that the board-approved trips are subject to change, and that's anytime the Department of Homeland Security, National Terrorism Advisory System issues an alert. And when that occurs, the board may decide not to sponsor the trip. Now, in addition to that, there is also language that says that the trips in the bank are pre-approved and they are ensuring student safety in their execution. And so in that language, it allows us to pull if we have a concern that isn't even registering as a Homeland Security concern. Finally, we also have a parent permission form that for our overseas trips, a line that actually says if we decide to cancel this trip for any reason, that funds may not necessarily be reimbursed. And that is a board-approved letter that goes to parents as well. So it was the consensus, I believe, of the policy group that what was written in the policy sort of satisfied the answer, the ability of the group to revoke attendance on a trip based for certain security or safety issues, and as well as make sure parents are aware of that. And then finally, because the bank of trips is approved every year annually, that every year we could say, all right, we want to take out the gap trip or we want to add in another trip. And so the policy group felt like that addressed those concerns. Any questions, comments about that part?
I have a question then. So your recommendation is to have out of country trips still in the bank?
It was the opinion of the group that if we do include them in the bank, that we can reapprove or take away approval annually. So if this, sorry, as needed.
Well, and I was part of that committee, that group. I'm still of the opinion that we should take all out-of-country trips and approve them annually. And I think we're okay doing that in the sense that there's so much advanced planning that goes into out-of-country trips that if the teachers give us that information in advance, then we can approve it at a board meeting. I don't want to keep it in the bank, and then there's an oversight. For example, this year, there's an oversight, we didn't approve the bank, we were supposed to approve it over the summer, and we didn't. I'm just more comfortable with out-of-country trips being approved annually at the board meeting,
So,
or at that, whenever.
so if I'm hearing you correctly, let's not bank overseas trips. Let's approve them as they come up. As the teacher requests the overseas trip, we approve it for that year. And then if it needs to happen again, the teacher would reapply for that trip.
And I'm one of, 9 board members, so that's my opinion on that particular issue.
Are there any teachers here who have applied for overseas trips who would like to weigh in on that? Who have, a different stance maybe, or the details of doing that might be cumbersome? When we bank a trip, the overseas trip gives specifics about the trip. And that could change. This year when I go to this country, I might be seeing A, B, and C, but the next time I go, it might look differently. The dates will change, as will the group of students maybe. So there is some, I think, credence to the board and the council taking a look at the trip, and then the board approving the trip as it comes up each time for approval, rather than putting it into a bank. The idea of the bank, and I think Jen's going to get into this, is that teachers have a list of trips that they know are curricularly aligned, that do have a focus that's aligned to curriculum at that grade level, and they can then look at this bank and say, oh, okay, this looks like a great trip. We haven't taken that trip at this grade level. We might want to take this trip this year. I don't know that it was meant to house a trip such as an overseas type trip. So, it all depends on how we're looking at banks. But is there any other discussion on the floor about Mrs. Hurd-Simmons' comment? Mrs. Cranny?
Is there a disadvantage to banking or to not banking the trip? Does that make it more cumbersome for the teacher to plan it if it's not in the bank?
It's a timing issue. The reason we started the bank is to make it easier for the teachers to get approval.
Right. I can see that for a normal field trip, but for an overseas trip.
Mrs. Hickey, can you pull up the bank of overseas trips? I think some of the logistics of the forms that teachers have to complete when they submit a field trip, and I don't know, teachers, you need to speak up to this, but that's probably the cumbersome piece.
They have to plan a month or 2 in advance.
Of course.
To get it approved.
Probably a year in advance.
A month or 2 of when they need to start working on it. Does that make sense?
The policy, just reading from it right now, the 121 AG9, so this is the administrative guideline, says groups and sponsors contemplating foreign travel must present a preliminary request to the board at least 12 months prior to the anticipated departure.
So if you scroll down those trips, Mary Ann, you can see that the teachers have highlighted some of them what they're doing, others have addressed standards here, and I don't know, Lauren Baker, who's the curriculum leader for world language, a lot of these are affiliated with the world language department. I don't know, Lauren, if you'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, actually, I had a question, Jen. Were they always having to be a year, proposed a year prior? Because I think I'm familiar with some trips that might have actually been less than a year.
I have a date here of the board policy being revised, November 9th, 2011. So I can't speak to anything before that, but that's apparently when the policy was approved.
Because to your point, I think that generally these trips are planned very far in advance. So in that sense, it shouldn't be a problem, but I don't know that they were always a year or more in advance.
Yes.
Are there any trips that are part of the curriculum that are in the course of study? Because if that were the case, I don't know if that is the case at all or not.
No, there should not be any field trip
Okay.
that's mandated because of curriculum. Is that what you're asking? So we have to go to Germany because we're in German 4.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was in any of their curriculum. Okay.
In this could be a matter of changing the policy too. That 12-month may not make sense. So it could be a matter of changing the policy. That's, I don't want to say similar to do, but yeah.
I'm sorry, yes, Mr. Burley.
There may be one potential problem with the 12-month lead time. Is that we have different teachers teach the higher level language classes, which generally are where the students come from for this cultural experience, this experience. So because that changes from year to year, that's a potential issue with the 12-month lead time, which I think goes to Barbara's point of perhaps looking at that policy maybe at 6 months, which I think is very reasonable.
Makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Burley. Okay, so to summarize what I'm hearing, the discussion, take to the policy committee a proposal to change the policy to indicate 6 months prior notice to the board of an overseas trip, number one. And number two, we will no longer have a bank of approved overseas trips, that we will have a list of overseas trips that come to this board curriculum council for approval to, at the next board meeting by the board on an individual basis. So if a group of students, the teacher would like a group of students to travel to Germany, then that teacher would bring the request through Ms. Saxa to this group. This group would say aye, A, or nay, pass it on to the board would approve the trip for that school year. And if that trip were to be taken again, it would come up again at Board Curriculum Council with the same process. The paperwork, there is extensive, I shouldn't say extensive, but there is a form to complete. So we can certainly, and I think the teachers do, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Saxa, get a copy of their paperwork with the approval. So it's electronic. They can, if it's the same, if we're going to take the same Dublin trip here, walking tour, St. Patrick's, if it's the same, then the teachers certainly could just copy and paste that same itinerary for the next year, so as not to create, undue hardship here for the planning piece. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Another question arose about whether or not the bank is serving its intended purpose of spreading out the field trips reasonably, preventing too much repetition of any single field trip, and generally allowing principals and curricular leaders to have an idea of who's going on what trip. And to answer that question, I think it might be better to sort of turn it over to some of the principals who are here, whether or not we feel like this bank is indeed serving the purpose, and not just principals, but teachers, leaders, anybody who's in the room, is the bank serving the purpose of helping us organize the trips and prevent too much repetition from happening, either within or across grades.
I know that for third grade, it's a big help because we can see what other people have applied for and that are approved. So something we might not have thought of in our building and somebody else did, it's out there. I know that Longwood Gardens is out there for a few grades. However, their programs are very different. So for third grade, we might go because they have a wonderful water program which ties into our very large science unit on water. We do the FOSS kit, we do the water cycle. And I went as a parent last year with my son's third grade, and we're now trying to do it for Beaver Creek this year because the program was so fabulous. So I think Longwood Gardens might be on there for a few grades, but they are for different curricular areas because they do offer many different programs for science and social studies.
Danielle, I agree with you. One of the things that I noticed when teachers are focusing on this list. First of all, this is an incredible list to be able to access. A lot of work has been put into this, which has been helpful, because I do think that it's meeting our needs specific to the objectives at grade level, specific obviously to the curriculum and standards. So it does spell out the different things, like your example regarding Longwood Gardens, where there are different activities. So that's the purpose, is to make sure that it's well designed. And I think in the past, before we had this, that wasn't happening. It was more of a theme that you were going on. It wasn't really focused on the curricular area. So I think this has been fantastic and a real help. And the teachers are really thinking about, what's happening in the building, where they've been location-wise, as well as how it's serving the purpose. I agree with
Mrs. Dickey, would you be kind enough, thank you, Mr. Fernandez, to pull up the field trips that we're speaking about?
I'm sorry, what
The
did you
field
say?
trips,
Any grade level?
I believe we're talking about grade 3.
Grade 3?
Can I?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I had talked to Mrs. Simonelli about this. I have no doubt that there are great programs for first and third grade, and teachers do wonderful things with it. I think more, when I started hearing about this process, some of the concern is, just strictly from a parent and student perspective, is, oh no, here I go to Longwood Gardens again. I know it's a totally different program, but if, in your elementary career, first and fifth grade, if you're going in first and then you're going again in third, it's a bit of a disappointment. And there's so many ways to enrich our children that perhaps at grade level could consider doing a history field trip in first grade instead of the Longwood Gardens field trip. So I guess my question is more for elementary school principals. Are we encouraging, if we see that two grades or different grades are going to the same program, perhaps considering an enrichment in a different area, just so that children can have a different perspective and a different field trip? Because for them, from their eyes, it's very similar and it's the same thing. And
Yeah.
they're not inexpensive anymore. It used to be it was a $5 or $6 fee, okay, you go again, but that's changing also. So
And Jane, when I mentioned, what was mentioned regarding Longwood Gardens, and of course it's only 3 times, I just looked that up. The point is, in my building, we don't go 3 times to Longwood Gardens. So it is looked at. I think we're looking more of a global opportunity for all buildings to have the ability to focus in on those areas that they want to certainly attend. So I think, and I don't want to speak for everyone here, but I look at that and make sure that we're trying to stay away from location, unless there is a real specific focus area that's real important to the curriculum that we feel that we want to go again. But I haven't had it happen, so.
I
it's more of a
appreciate
list.
that, and I think that was more when the conversation first started, from a parent perspective.
Right.
That's where it was coming from, is that they're all great programs, and no one's
Sure.
denying that, but, for the kids and even the parents, they're like, oh, we did that already.
Mr. Abbott?
I would certainly agree with what Mr. Fernandez has said. We try to do the same. But having those options out there keeps it fresh for the teachers too. Because if you go to Longwood Gardens every year for 10 years to the same program, it's not fresh for the teacher anymore. So having those opportunities, so maybe we'll do a history trip one year in 3rd grade, maybe we'll do a science trip another year, or if we can find a math, we keep looking for math trips, but we're not finding them. But we
Longwood
can-
Gardens has one of those.
We'll-
That's what I appreciate about the bank. I think it absolutely serves that purpose.
Yes,
And so
I-
long as we're sensitive to that, I'm very pleased with the way it's turned out.
Mrs. Egan?
Right, we've always, not always, in the past 4 or 5 years, we've taken a trip to the Kimmel Center. So the teachers were trying to look for something new, and because I did go as a parent to Longwood Garden with Cleveland Hills last year, I thought it would be something new and different for us and our kids, because we've been going to the Kimmel Center for 4 or 5 years in a row. So if, Dr. Wallace sees that, oh, well, 2nd grade went, so 3rd grade can't go, can't go this year.
Right, but
You know, the
perhaps
principals were
next
saying
year,
that-
2nd grade can pick something different, so
Right.
3rd grade, that kind of
Right.
thing. That's great. Yeah.
Mrs. Red-Simmons?
Yes, in the past, when the board had to approve field trips on a monthly basis, there was a way to track where everyone was going, and I was wondering, I don't know if the principals all have the same tracking system, but if there was a way that on like this master sheet here, for example, third grade, add another column and just list in the year 2012-13, who is doing what, it just, so you just kind of get a global view of who's doing what from an administrative perspective, or, I don't know if you want that information, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing, you know, 7 elementary schools went to, you know, Franklin Institute. Not that I'm gonna do anything about it, but it's, you know, kind of for information, just to get the global view of how our curriculum is working in what areas for enriching our children. Is there any interest, is it hard to do that?
I think I'm hearing the principals say, because that they do that maybe more informally than formally. Some of them may keep charts or databases or a spreadsheet of where groups are going on trips, because too, the principals, they want to know if kids are going on the same trip year after year. They certainly don't want that experience for their students either. But I don't know that we've ever collected that district-wide.
Well, we used to when we had to prove it every month. But with this new bank, we haven't. I don't know if there's a need from an administrative perspective to do that. If that's so, then everybody kind of sends tracking form, which is not going to do, obviously. It's just an idea.
And I know principals, if anybody wants to weigh in on that, there certainly could be some kind of an informal survey. So grade level leaders, for example, could just ask the teachers at their grade levels where folks have taken a field trip.
Well, my thought is if the principals have to sign off on it, they're tracking it somewhere because they need to understand what the grade levels are doing it. So if they have an Excel data sheet, that can just dump right into this. You see what I'm saying?
No, I do see what you're saying. It's,
I'm just trying to, so it's not a lot of work. It should be something that could match the system you just dropped in.
So is the interest in doing this just interest to see where folks are going? Because certainly the principals are looking at it from the lens of the CEO of their buildings, that they're ensuring that the trips are curricularly aligned, that they are trips that will increase student achievement indirectly because it's an experience rather than a classroom setting. So I guess my wondering is, so what would we do with this information? Because it will take time to collect this information. And not that anybody minds spending time, but what will we do with it then? What's the purpose of our collecting it?
What would be the value other than just an informational? That's, I guess, my hesitation too. I see the value of knowing, but are we going to, is it going to change anything? Is it going to help the teachers in any way to know that, okay, most kids are going here, maybe we should too? I don't, that would be my.
Well, would it help the principals?
Mr. Abbott?
I was just thinking, Dr. McGill, if the purpose is informational, that information for the division could be brought forward from transportation, because we have to apply, all of us, through transportation to get the process to go. So if it's just for information, where's everybody going? Transportation has that.
They have to look, so they would know not just Kennett Square, they would know Longwood Gardens.
They would know Longwood Gardens, how long, where they dropped off, and where they picked up.
Which grade level would they have that?
But they wouldn't know science, math, social studies. They wouldn't know a purpose. You would just know that you're going along with gardens if that's what your issue is. But as was pointed out, there are many purposes. So,
Dr. Lawler?
I just wanted to mention, this in and of itself is incredibly time consuming for a building administrator, even with the help of secretaries, because we feel an immense sense of responsibility for safety for the students. And there's so much board policy and paperwork that goes into this. And I'm sure the principal here, in one way, shape, or form, has some sort of form. I created my own form that, in conjunction with the secretary, to make sure that the application has been sent in, that the transportation request was sent in, parent permission forms, the letters to the chaperones, where all the clearances checked. So there is a lot of steps to this, and yes, we're tracking it because we're ultimately responsible for the safety of the students.
Seriously, Dr. Neal, all that said, we could check it and leave it at that. Let's check with transportation.
Okay.
It may be very easy to acquire the data that RMN, we might be able to go back 2 or 3 years. So let's just check with them and let's leave it at that, and we can go from there.
We'll check with transportation. I believe Mrs. Leggett, you had your hand up, so you don't want to overlook your comment.
Keeping with the Longwood Gardens theme, on grade 1, I just wanted clarification. If you could go to grade 1 at the bottom, it's there. Longwood Gardens trip is there. It's struck through, but it says approved at the end. So are we or are we not allowed in grade 1 to go to Longwood Gardens?
Well, that is a conundrum, isn't it? The strike
On
through,
page 8.
I see it, the strike through, as you can see, means not approved. And the A means approved, so we have both here. And I would just need to look at the prior year. Kindergarten is attending, and we would want to make sure it's not for the same. You know, the kindergarten is the math. And I don't like to speak on assumptions, but my thought is that it could be that the person who keeps track of the bank may have just forgotten to put the strike through the A. But I would want to check on that.
We have gone to Longwood Gardens.
Let's see, science. It's a different trip.
All right, so we'll check on that and make sure that we clarify that for grade 1. If you would just keep us posted, Mrs. Leggett, if there is any grade 1 teacher that's waiting to hear about this before the November meeting, so that we can contact them directly. Just in closing, to make sure that we're clear, so what I will do is contact transportation to find out where trips have been taken at each grade level in the past year. And we'll bring that to BCC in November, if transportation can get it together by November. Yes, Mrs. Lincoln.
So one more piece of information, just because I have just applied at Longwood Gardens, if you're a Title I school, you can apply for the grant, and they will waive the fee, the $5 fee, and they will also provide free transportation, that we can get free transportation, so. So I mean, I went back and forth because there are specific dates that you have to go if they grant you that, but you could, it was very easy. I filled out a 1-page grant. Dr. Wallace helped me get some information from our school, and Jen did too. I faxed that over, and then a $5 fee for the program is waived. And there's also, if you wanted to apply for free, bus transportation, there's another form that you could fill out. So I think that's very generous.
Yes, and that's a $5 fee per child?
Per child. So,
Great. Okay, so
but only
Mrs.
Title I,
Lincoln
only
knows
Title I
Mrs.
schools.
Hickey.
Title I schools, so that's, for us, that's it.
So everyone knows we have 4 Title I elementary schools, Beaver Creek, Bradford Heights, East Ward, and Lionville Elementary. So those 4 schools would qualify for that. Great.
I feel like I should know the answer to this, but is there a limit to the number of field trips any grade or class can take every year? And is that just curricular, or does that include the non-curricular?
There is a recommendation written on the Google site that it's 1 per semester of curricular trips, and only 1, and this is for sure, that's not written in the policy, that's the suggestion on the site. And then there is also a rule that there is only 1 social event per year. So principals have to use their discretion in when that occurs and where.
All right. So
Any other comments, Dr. Mateo?
I do not. Public input. No? Stephanie? SAP yet? No, you're good? Okay. All right, program information. So this is an item from last month. Mr. Daney, our science curriculum leader, had brought a request to dispose of environmental science text. And if you remember or not, it was suggested that we see if the middle level might be able to use these texts. So I believe Mr. Daney has an update for us.
We brought the books to our K-12 science meeting, offered them up to all of our science teachers at the middle level. We had a couple that went out the door with those teachers, but other than that, they said they were free to dispose of.
Okay, so unless there is any further discussion of this item, we will send Laurie Piper the textbook information, and Laurie will see if she can find someone to buy the textbooks, or we will come to the board with a request to have them disposed of. Thank you, Mr. Williams. All right, the next item, Keystone exams. So if we're ready for the roller coaster ride that we are beginning this year with the Keystone exams. As you know, Pennsylvania districts received a mandate from the Pennsylvania Department of Education to implement Keystone exams beginning this school year, 2012-13. So the purpose of this presentation, because we have talked about Keystones before, but I wanted to highlight for you the requirements imposed by this regulation again, and to increase everybody's awareness of the financial obligations that are being imposed on districts by the Keystone mandate. So what are the Keystones? Well, just to review, a state-mandated end-of-course test. Now that probably is going to be a little confusing, this definition, when we get into when we're administering Keystones, but they are meant to be end-of-course tests that are intended as a measure of proficiency in identified subjects. Next slide. How will PA use the Keystone exam results? In two ways. So AYP, adequate yearly progress, for high school, so no longer will we have PSSA at the high school level. We'll have Keystone exams only. And starting with the class of 2017, they will not only be an AYP measure, they will also be a requirement for high school graduation. So next slide. What's the urgency? The urgency for us in terms of thinking about the repercussions of Keystone is that in this school year, 2013, the Algebra 1 and the English Literature Keystone exams will be the measure for high school AYP. Now you know we're usually most concerned about performance. How did our kids do on a particular standardized assessment? But we also have an AYP for participation. So we have to have all our children taking the assessment. So Algebra 1 and English Literature count for both performance and participation. And I mention that because students this year will also take biology. They'll take a biology Keystone for high school AYP, but for participation only. Now the first two bullets for AYP pertain to our current 11th grade students. You say to yourself, okay, well there are some 11th grade students who are not taking Algebra 1, who are not taking biology. And that would be true. So how is that an end-of-course exam? Well, there needed to be some measure for the high schools for adequate yearly progress. So a group of administrators, and I believe there are some in this room who are part of that discussion group, and from that discussion came the decision that the best way to measure high school AYP was through an 11th grade assessment of these Keystone exams, Algebra 1 and English Lit. Now, beginning with the 8th grade, the current 8th grade class is the class of 2017. That's when they'll graduate. They will need to score proficient or advanced on a set of Keystone exams, and we'll get to that slide later as to which Keystone exams, in order to earn a high school diploma. So I want that to resonate a little bit for you, that not only are we concerned about whether they hit the benchmark, the target for AYP, but we need to be concerned about their scoring proficient or advanced on a Keystone for graduation in order to graduate from our district. Yes, Mrs. Simonelli.
What does it mean, participation? Because couldn't it-
They have to take the test. They have to sit for the test.
But all students, even if they haven't taken algebra, or only students that have taken algebra?
So right now, the 11th grade, all 11th graders have to take the Algebra 1. Okay? Moving forward, so let's talk about the students who are currently in 9th grade. Okay? If they're taking an Algebra 1 course, they would take the Algebra 1 Keystone at the end of the course, which the Keystone is administered, and we'll get to that slide, 3 times a year, and one of those times is May. So if the student is taking it at the end of the course, it would be in May. This is very, stop me when you need to, because as I've said to many people, I've been living this, so it's a little more clear to me, even though it's confusing, clear.
I'm sorry, just to follow up on that. So when the state looks at participation, what exactly are they looking for? Because eventually you're going to have it, so different years, different number of kids are going to take it, different...
But of that group, you have to have 95% of them.
Okay, 95% of anybody taking Algebra 1.
Yes.
As a year.
Yes. And usually we have 100%.
I was going to say, the expectation of our 11th graders is everyone in the last 3 years, or 4 years, or 5 years is at Algebra 1. So we expect 100% of our 11th graders to take the Algebra 1 piece.
Well, and that gets to another question, which we have, I have a slide for that at the end of the presentation, but not 100% will have to sit for it this year because the current 11th grade was part of the group in 2011 who took the Keystone in 2011. So the students who scored proficient or advanced in 2011 do not have to sit this year for the Keystone. So we have the stats on how many were proficient at each school, so we know how many students will have to sit for the test. Yes, Mrs. Hudson?
Do you have the percentage of students that met that level?
Yes.
What is that?
So I had that for the last slide because I wanted to work up to that so you would see the urgency of the last slide, which is about. Okay.
Well, the
You wanna get here?
expectation is very few, because only a small percentage took them in 2011, and even a smaller percentage scored proficient or advanced proficient. So, not very many.
We'll see.
My guess is
That is
we
suspense.
take that.
Keep them interested in the presentation. Okay, so required Keystones, next slide. All right, so we're looking at required Keystones. Algebra 1. So Algebra 1 and English Lit will always be the AYP, performance and participation. Beginning with the class of 2017, there'll also be a graduation requirement. That's what GR is. Okay. Biology will be for participation until the class of 2017 when it kicks in for a graduation requirement. So it will always be participation. It will never be performance for AYP, but it will have the additional weight of being a graduation requirement for the current 8th graders. Then you have the class of 2019, the current 6th graders. So we add to their list of graduation requirements, we add English composition. So now we have AYP, Algebra 1, English Lit. Now for the class of 2019 for graduation requirement, we have Algebra 1, English Lit, Biology, English Common. Okay, and then you see where this is headed. The current 5th grade then has 5 keystones for a graduation requirement. So the stakes get higher. And you know, all of this is issued with a caveat because everything that we see about Keystone says, as long as there are funds available to support the Keystones. But then again, if you go onto the website, go onto the SAS website, pdesas.org, and you'll see that the assessments are offered online and paper and pencil right now. Okay, so you think to yourself, okay, so if it costs a lot of money for the state to print and distribute test booklets, but it doesn't cost a whole lot of money to administer an online assessment through their data corporation, DRC, Data Recognition Corporation. Where is this headed? Is this headed toward districts, besides bearing costs for supplemental instruction, also bearing costs for online test administration? I'm just putting that out there. So will the requirement go away, or will it just be additional fiscal requirements for districts? Mrs. Cran?
I understand the kids will take the Algebra 1 and Biology after they take those courses, but when will they be taking the English Lit and the English Composition?
So I have a suggestion here which needs to be vetted through the principals, but I have a chart here where we'll see that there is a suggestion from the state, and we do have to talk about what that looks like for our kids. So, okay, these are the required keystones. Next slide. These are the voluntary keystones, and I think I showed this before, and people would say, okay, why would you want to take a voluntary keystone? But there are science people, social studies people, math people who say, well, will children take my course seriously if there's not an associated keystone, especially if the keystone is connected to a graduation requirement? I don't know. That's a wondering. So we have to see where the first 5 head before we think about where the next 5 might go. Mrs. Bertoni?
I was just wondering about the civics and government for 2020.
Yes.
Do we know what year we're teaching that and where the students are going to take that course?
Again, another repercussion, the secondary principals, and I will sit down talking about, graduation requirements. Do we need to get some folks in the room to talk about what are we looking at with course sequencing? What do our courses look like? When do we teach these, middle level through high school?
Is there any, it's probably a silly question because the answer is probably no, but has the state said what the expectation is for civics and government?
What do you mean expectation?
Well, what the test is going to, what the material is going to be covered?
Well, there are standards.
Just the general standards.
Yeah, and we're guessing that all the keystones will have the same look as the current keystones that we know, with a lot of writing across curriculum, so. But,
do we offer anything at this point that covers the standard in civics and government?
not a single course, civics and government, is that what you're saying? I believe, Ms. Jackson, we have a government course at 11th grade.
That's actually a civics and government course at STEM.
At STEM, civics and government course at STEM in 10th grade.
Right, nothing.
But not. So we're going to add to the list the different things that we need to think about, right, Mr. Weidel?
I have a question about U.S. history.
Okay.
Being that they learn U.S. history in 7th and 8th grade, would that be a requirement because the course title is that in 7th and 8th grade? So like 7th and 8th graders who are taking Algebra 1 are going to take that assessment. Our 7th and or 8th graders are going to have to take the U.S. history exam in middle school, since that is.
Well, we don't know what that exam is. We don't know what the dates are. that are pertinent to the exam. What do you only go up to what date?
We'll go into prior to the Civil War, and then what eighth grade will cover up through the Roaring '20s, World War I. So, I'm just saying that's our course title. So I don't know if that's going to lead to a course title change.
Okay, well, think about this group as voluntary. So when we get to the point where we know these are going to happen, as we get closer, and maybe that will roll out in the next couple of years, then we have to make decisions as a group whether or not this is voluntary or required in Devon. Right now, it's voluntary. We do not have to administer any of these keystones that you see on this slide. I'm sorry, Mrs. Ritson.
So we have to roll out Algebra 1 and English Lit
Yes,
and biology,
yes,
and that's all our have-tos right now.
correct.
And we've changed our curriculum to meet all these standards, is that correct?
We have not changed all our curricula. We have these curricula. I think there is alignment with the Keystone. So the Keystone is aligned to the Common Core, but we have not changed all the curriculum to align to this, no. So that's the work in progress with the Common Core professional development.
So that will be done. Does that include grades, K through 12, or is that more middle school, high school? Or is it?
Is what the curriculum alignment? The curriculum alignment is K through 12.
So that's being done it'll be done by what, end of this year?
Not all curriculum, no. And I think when we looked at the 5-year plan for implementing the Common Core, we know this is urgent, but we have to address things strategically. So where we get the most bang for our buck is we have to change instruction and assessment. It doesn't do us any good to change assessments, internal assessments, if we don't also change instruction. So we're looking at that through the lens of the Common Core so that the teachers understand the rigor of the Common Core and what that looks like instructionally in their classes.
Yeah,
So that's
Barbara,
on the next couple of
let
slides.
me lead you into a segue. Not that everybody sitting here isn't very important, but obviously math and English language arts are really critical. So what you're going to see on the board level for all of our board members is a lot of curricular changes that are going to be possible over the next 12 months. That's the next budget cycle. You're going to see materials. You're going to see texts. You're going to see entire programs coming in that are going to have to align to the Common Core that you have not seen in the past. So that's kind of something that is absolutely something that you need to begin to think about. From our board perspective, from our teaching perspective, we've got to know what those materials are. We've got to be looking at how these tests are constructed, because these tests are constructed differently than what we're doing right now. We've got to be looking at PARC and Common Core and any released items from the state, and there aren't many for our teachers out there, knowing where the websites are, and really lining our curriculums up. And as Lynn said, that's going to take time and money for our board. Yes, Kate?
Well, my only concern is sometimes we put the cart before the horse in that I don't want to go out and buy things on the expectation of what the state is going to require of us. Would it be better off waiting till we see what the test consists of before we try and guess?
We'll know that. We'll know that this year. The math and the language art tests, we'll know what it consists of.
Okay, all right, so we'll start with those, and then, and not that I like to, spend money, but can we see a cost down also of the professional development that's going to go along with?
Massive professional development. You bet.
To go along with the curriculum change.
Correct.
I'm very hesitant of making changes without having all the pieces in place.
If we change to a whole different math sequence, the professional development will be in terms of multiple years.
Because right now,
It will
we
not
switched
occur.
off the whole math. already switched it once, right?
I don't know.
So, I mean, sixth grade is due this year.
Yeah, because that's the first grade that's gone to the Common Core.
Okay, so this is in line with what the state wants.
So, right.
So we've got 11 more grades.
Yeah. Well, and that's fine. I was very uncomfortable this year when the curriculum rolled out just 2 weeks before school started. So I know it's gonna cost money. I'd like to see the.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Our work with the folks, the teachers in this room is critical. Mission critical.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mary Ann, thank you. So this year, next slide, please. There are 3 testing waves this year. 2 winter waves, a spring wave, and a summer wave. So we are going to be administering tests during the winter and during the spring. We're going to be administering Algebra 1 and English Lit to the 11th grade in the December wave. And to the 11th grade in January, we're going to be administering the biology. Also in that December wave, we are administering Algebra 1 to the current 8th grade who are in Algebra 2. Now, what we are hoping is that when we get those results, the kids will do so well, they will not need to retake the test in May. However, we like insurance, so if we give the test in December and we have any students who did not do well on the Algebra 1 or the English Lit, we will have some time to offer some supplemental instruction. Now I say some because we will not get results from the winter keystones until March 4th. So that gives us March 4th until May 12th to offer any supplemental instruction. Our dilemma is, when does this instruction take place? Because 11th graders could be in a variety of math courses. When does that happen? Is it fair to a student to make them take the test again without having some support in place? We have agreed as a secondary group not to offer supplemental instruction to 11th graders in biology. And that, again, the children are in a variety of science courses. When would the supplemental instruction take place? Who would deliver it? At least in math, you could technically say that the math teacher is a math teacher, but the physics teacher is not a biology teacher. Because biology is for participation only, we felt that was the best strategy for this year, since this was thrust upon us in July, really. The final decision came out in July. So everyone is scurrying to do the best things for kids without creating, and this is the dilemma, without creating a sense of urgency on children and having that stress trickle down to them. So I want to get to the slide, since I know this is taking a little longer. If we could just pass through, and I can come back to these other things, what we're doing, how we're preparing. Next slide. Next slide, I think you know which. Next slide, right there. Okay. This is the slide that you were asking about, when are the children taking particular tests. So if you read across 2013, the grade 11 is taking their 3 assessments in the winter. Okay. Grade 10, if they're taking Algebra 1, they would take it at the end of the year in May. If they're taking biology, they would take it at the end of the year in May. They would take English Lit at the end of the year in May. Any student in grade 10 also who is above Algebra 1, we want them to take the Algebra 1 test as well. This helps with The big thing that comes up is remediation and supplemental instruction. If we know where these students are scoring, and we need to remediate them in their 11th grade year, we can plan for that supplemental instruction and that remediation. However, that comes with a cost. What does that look like for this student? When can that happen? Instead of the study hall, do they have an additional supplemental math, similar to at the high school level might be a Math Plus for Algebra 1? What does it look like in English Lit if they do not score proficient or advanced on English Lit? But what we have to be conscious of is that the remediation must happen during or before the 11th grade year. We cannot remediate senior year. So 11th grade is our last opportunity to offer supplemental instruction to students. As you can see, when we progress through the years, this will get a little less onerous. But for right now, we need to plan for the students to pass the Algebra 1, the Lit Keystones. And we need to have a plan in place for what happens if they do not pass. Mrs. Hudson.
I have two questions, and Dr. Reed here, is here. Have we changed our policy on graduation requirements to tie in the Keystone exams?
Not yet.
So we need to do that. That would be very, very important to do soon, I would think.
That's on our list with the graduation requirements, the course of study, the progression of courses. All of these things need to be on our list of our to-do list.
Okay, and then second of all, this probably goes to the principals, both at the middle school and the high school, and that is what kind of public relations are we doing with the parents to explain that when they take these tests, this is part of their graduation requirement?
So the principals have parent evenings planned. So we have a PowerPoint presentation that's, we think, is addressing the questions that are circulating among parents. So we'll be meeting as a principals group to take a look at the PowerPoint. Does it include everything? Do we need to add some things? What do we need? So that the principals have, and these are middle school principals as well as high school principals who will be delivering this presentation, but they'll be using the same information so that people are getting the same information, and then we can post that.
It's my thought that the parents that possibly need to be there, or that may have the students that may struggle in some of these areas. So how are we reaching everyone? Is it letter? We're doing letter.
So we have a letter announcing the presentation, yes, and we will have a letter telling, which this letter talks to the parents about their students taking the Keystone and having the opportunity to attend a presentation. So I'm sure that if that letter goes home, and principals can speak better to how they're sending that to parents. And then we also, I know the principals have the ability to send a blast that there is information on the Keystones posted on the school website, on the district website. This impacts you, kind of like Uncle Sam. We want you. So as much as we can and as much as we can communicate, over-communicate, as Dr. Mussolini says, so that we can get as many people informed about what this means to their child. I think the urgency for parents, this is just my opinion, will kick in when it's a graduation requirement. For us, the urgency is here already because we feel very strongly and proudly about our students performing for an adequate yearly progress. So our urgency is today. I don't know if parents will feel that urgency. We'll see. Yes, Mrs. Crowley, Mrs. Bertoni.
addressing the immediate problem, the 11th graders took a benchmark test already this year, correct?
Yes.
So you already probably have targeted kids who need remediation before the test.
We have the data from how well the children performed on the Study Island benchmark. Yes, so the principals and their data teams are poring over that data and making plans for what the implications are for next steps for those students.
So hopefully remediation can happen before they actually take the test.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, again, you know, test preparation in this world is different because we don't know the question scheme, and they haven't released much. So while, you know, you talk to the math guys, our math folks in the secondary level might be factoring. These questions might be, like you have to determine what the equation is from the writing, then factor for the answer. And that's just a whole different mindset, colleagues. So let me say this. We're very concerned about our AYP next year. Very concerned. And I think every school district in the Commonwealth is. But we can't poo-poo that. Where our high schools have attained could actually fall 40% by next year. Be horrendous.
Mrs. Bertino.
Well, a couple of things. I think when you talk about your target audience long term, the push has to be with the 8th graders going into 9th grade, when all the parents show up in the beginning of 9th grade, even now when 5th graders are going into 6th grade, start getting parents thinking about it, and that's when you have them together. Short run, I think we've got to get creative like we did. I mean, I could be wrong, but I thought that our scores on PSSA significantly improved when we had put the carrot out there that if you scored well, if you scored proficient, you didn't have to take the final at the end of the year for the seniors. So I don't know what we can do, but I think we have to we've got to throw a carrot to the kids, because especially in these first few years when it really doesn't, it's for just data, they're not going to take it seriously. So.
And I have to echo that. I mean, I know my 10th grader is already expressing test fatigue, and they haven't got to the keystones yet. So, I think it is going to be important that, we, as a district, do the professional development that gets our teachers ready to administer these exams, but then at the building level, the teachers and the principals, make it clear to the kids without ratcheting up the anxiety, which I know is a hard balance to strike, but, it's really going to be critical that the kids don't understand that the tests are important.
In the interest of time, Mrs. Hickey, if you could pull up the slide that's separate from this PowerPoint. I think I made the point, and I will come back next month to talk a little more about supplemental instruction and remediation. The secondary principals and I will be meeting to formulate a plan for what that might look like and bring it to this council in the upcoming months. But you asked about the students who took the Algebra 1 Keystone in 2011. And what you see are the percentage of proficient and advanced scores at each building, then district-wide and statewide. So of the students who took the assessment in 2011, those are the percentages that scored proficient and advanced.
So that 45% tells you a couple of things. On the top of that list, it says, I don't care. I took this course 3 years ago. I really don't care about this. I need a test and let me see what I can do. Because you see our middle schools where the kids were taking Algebra 1 did better. So they said, well, I'm in the course. I have the course. I know what I'm doing. Let me tackle it. Let me see what I can do. And this is what my fear is for our high schools next year. Our excellent high schools, top 20 high schools in the state, My fear is we could be looking at 45. Now, I know that we're doing things about that, but you can see the statistics. They're not strong, Carol.
These were our students who are in Algebra 1 at this point.
These were our high school students.
This was
Oh, they were
our-
taking the Algebra 1.
Yeah.
I thought we gave it to everybody.
No, we only give it to our Algebra 1.
And there are struggling
These are
math students
struggling
because they've taken it.
When did they take it? What year, or what month?
May, May, the first.
Took it at the end?
And they said it was impossible.
Okay, well, yeah, I don't care still pops in. You gotta remember, these kids are taking AP exams, they're taking SAT exams, they're getting ready for college, it's their junior year, they're taking end of course exams, and then we're gonna say to them, take these Keystone exams, which by the way, don't count for anything except AYP for your school next year. You be a 15-year-old, 16-year-old.
That's why I said we have to find a character.
That's why we're taking them in December.
And then again in March, and then again in May. That's going to start.
I knew the principals will have
But you know what,
some.
that's part of it. If you pass it now, you don't have to take it again. I mean, that's another carrot to hang out there.
That is.
You won't have to do the you're gonna lose your study halls for remediation if you don't do well.
Right. Or you could gain something, right, Mr. Mulvey? Think about what motivates teenagers. All right, so we will be back monthly with Keystone reports. Thank you. If you have any additional questions, please save them for next month. Next month, our focus will be remediation, supplemental instruction. Now we have Mr. Danilchek and Mr. Campbell with the STEM report.
So excited to be here today. We were here many months ago when we started this, and today we have comparison data. When we first started out, it was data from December of last year, and then we did an additional round of things in the spring, and we're here to share that data and also look forward. And today we'll start with going through the PowerPoint and sharing the data, and any questions we'll take. And then we'll do a small group activity where we take things a little bit further beyond just getting a presentation and doing some questions. So expect to do some work a little later in this. Our overall results, these are the demographics of those that we surveyed in both December and then again in the late spring. Things in parentheses are the data from the numbers from December. Overall, the results are fantastic. You guys maintained really high scores. If you look at and on all categories from our surveys, we're above agree. So if we break down the numbers, agree has a value of 1, strongly agree a value of 2, no opinion 0, and then disagree -1 and strongly disagree -2. It's quite fantastic for your average score on all categories to be over 1. It means there are a lot of really good things happening at STEM. So looking into the student results, and the way this is set up, you see the different categories for the questions. Like for example, the safe thing means, is my school safe? Or are classes challenging? Do I feel support from administration? Things like that sort of categories. The line is the average, and the dotted gray line is the standard deviation of the average. So a couple things emerge from this. Students feel extremely safe. They feel that the classes are very challenging, and they're very appreciative of not having to carry textbooks. At the same time, things that scored a little bit less high, but also are near that 1 average. Teachers prepared to teach their subject. I'm satisfied with the quality of teachers at STEM Academy. I enjoy using e-text, which is interesting. They appreciate not having to carry textbooks, but they're still struggling to adjust to e-text. the data's higher, they're getting more used to it. And they're not really interested, not as interested in having e-text learning formats, which helps guide decisions about instruction and design. Are you going to add?
Well, what I'll say about the blue ones there, while they're lower than everything else, they're still very good. And I think the two in the middle, where the first one, my teachers are prepared to teach the subjects. That comes from being at a brand new school with brand new philosophy, brand new strategies. And I think this year, with teachers going through the second year, I think the results will be much higher than they were last year.
Yeah, that's a really good point. All of those, even the things that are relatively lower, are still very high.
Well, and we had an instructional coach specifically designed to work with that. So I'm not sure what happened there, but that was a full complement as a full person in those positions to work with those things.
Yeah, in a way, like this data, if you see things that vary a little bit, it tells you what areas to investigate. And one of the things that I really appreciate is watching how the administration at the school, when we look through the data, they look at general trends and individual things, and they jump on that, and they try and figure out what's underneath that. That's what happened in this case. This slide, the light green is the data from the December survey, so it allows a comparison. And if you notice the dotted line above and below is the standard deviation on each question. So it sort of lets you know where things fall from the comparisons from December data and late spring data. We go back to that. There's two significant changes. They feel that administration is more responsive to the student needs, and they're also getting more comfortable with e-text. We also tried to tease out, are there differences by gender and grade level? And what would that be about? And overall, if you look at the lines, they track very well close to each other. There isn't really a significant difference. There's very minor differences, and we highlighted some of those. It seems that, in general, on some of the questions, 10th grade boys tend to have a higher experience or are more optimistic about things, and 9th graders tend to score, I think 9th grade girls, a little bit lower on some of the things. And if we investigate that a bit, there might be differences among teachers, there might be differences on the adjustment to STEM for a 9th grader that's harder than a 10th grader. And that was one of the things that jumped out in the December data, was how tough the beginning was for 9th graders. And even, I think around January, the school was making plans on how to build a better bridge from 8th grade to 9th grade, and they said, we could talk about that.
Yeah, what we did was, as far as the 8th and 9th grade transition, it'd be interesting to do the survey also with 9th and 10th graders east and west to see if the 10th grade boys were better adapted there, or if 9th grade was as low as it was. What we did is we went from, we did a 3-hour induction with 9th graders this year. Through my STEM, or through my headmaster meetings, in the community, I had over 300 people show up. We talked a lot about the school, a lot of these things that came out. And what they wanted was they wanted more information on the laptop, more information on the expectations of the school. They wanted a chance to talk with kids. That's it. So what we did is I talked about 20 minutes, Buck Jones went through all the laptop stuff. Then we had panels of kids. Two kids took a group of 10 students to the rooms, where they got their schedules, they took them on tours, and then in the rooms they also went through the different expectations of STEM. They could ask questions. They walked them through, set up all their internet accounts, their Gmail, their Schoology. So they had the opportunity really to see and talk to the experiences with their parents, with our STEM kids who had been there for a year. I think that was real valuable. And next year, we have a few more things to add on to, because I think there's things that are still coming out. So I think we may do that for 10th and 11th graders for the IB program, because now when they go into 11th grade, we find some deficiencies there where we have to prepare kids a little better. So it'll start to expand, and I think it'll be very positive. This year, so far, I started with 225 freshmen. I think I'm at 220. So we only lost 5 so far. So I don't know if that'll change. They might just be waiting. I don't know. We'll see.
And I think stuff's happened and you've done stuff with your teachers, and they're more used to project-based instruction and all sorts of things. it was a shock for teachers too. Exciting and challenging at the same time. Now, we had many open-ended questions where we asked students on different things. We asked them about what's positive and great about STEM, and they're really into this freedom or college-like environment where we're like able to be having more respect and more independence. They really enjoyed that. They felt honored by that, and that was very high. In many comments, that was what they talked about. Kids liked having laptops. That was pretty exciting to be able to have them and use them. The project-based learning, there's a real change from the December where they were a little bit more ambivalent, like, well, this is okay, but it's hard, I'm not quite sure, I'm not used to it. They didn't equivocate as much this time. Like overall, students were really into this new way of learning, they describe it, or learning through doing projects or being on teams and things like that. And they really appreciated their dedicated teachers. There were lots of individual comments about how a teacher made such a difference, or they learned how to write, or they learned how to think, or they just felt that it was touching to look at how much many of the teachers had impacted their experience in the year. Now with improvements, there were also a subset of critical comments about teachers. And they talked about being disrespected or lack of content knowledge, or they worked hard but they didn't get good grades. So there was a small number. And we shared that with instead we can talk about.
Yeah, for each of those improvements, we've kind of taken an intervention upon it. Obviously many students wrote nothing needs to be improved, awesome. But there are some students that did struggle. The comments about teachers, lack of content knowledge, like I said, a lot of teachers are uncomfortable with the inquiry-based or the project-based. So I know we've scheduled asset training, which is a training on, we work with Jen to schedule on how to do project-based for every one of our teachers. So they're becoming more comfortable with that. The disrespect or the lack of compassion, I don't know, I think you'll get that anywhere. Sometimes when people are under a high amount of stress or uncomfortable in new situations, sometimes we react in ways that we normally wouldn't react. And I think that's just amongst the 180 days that we go through, you may get that. Need for more collaboration rooms, not much I can do about that. What I did hear loud and clear from teachers, parents, kids, the community, everybody, administrators, is that the schools and the activities and the clubs in particular were very stressful for kids. They only got a chance to do a club maybe once a quarter. So I backed off making it required during the school day, but yet I put somebody in charge of it who is doing a great job. They email, it's Mike Sheehan, they email him, he sets it up with an advisor, and we just got a list of like maybe 30 clubs that we're running, including an app club, Model UN, all of it. So they're still running, but they're running more, no matter when it is during the day. If it's during a revision period when the kids don't have a class, if there's 5 kids they want to meet, they do it. If it's during lunch, they want to meet, they do it. If it's after school or seminar, they want to meet, they do it, rather than pigeonhole them into a certain piece, and they've been very responsive.
There was a lot of comments about it's really stressful or it's really hard to be a STEM student. There's so much required. And I think building into the curriculum, you guys are doing time management, stress management, executive function kind of things.
Right. Part of our advisory time this year, we have a very, very regulated, very structured, where they're working on stress management, time management, team activities. For our 9th and 10th graders, our teachers did a great job. The team leaders took them, put them into groups, and now during seminar, they're in study groups, so they already have connections. So we limit to where they are during the seminar periods so they can get some work done. So help them structure their time a little bit better. I haven't heard much out of 9th and 10th graders as far as stress or difficult workload. I think we've been through it once, and I think we've learned a lot about it. I think our teachers have adapted and have done a nice job.
Yeah, teachers can do a lot to set a tone to make that less of a problem for them. Very significant. A lot of students wrote, nothing needs to be improved.
I think if you look at that improvement piece, and again, I tell the students that a lot of the students' struggles, it's not a STEM struggle. It's a 9th to 10th or 8th and 9th grade, middle school to high school struggle, and there's a lot of that can get blurred. And when students have a hard time adjusting to stress, well, I guarantee you, if you go to Downtown East or Downtown West, there's stress on students there too. Even in the 11th grade with a lot of AP courses they may take. It's just there. And maybe they've never experienced it before. So I try to delineate what is high school and what is STEM, and that can sometimes be challenging.
Yeah. And there's some idiosyncratic ways that you can support them in stress. If they're working more in projects on teams, the kind of stress you might get in the work world or college, you need different tools to cope with that. And hopefully, you guys will continue to do that, integrate into your program. I won't go that much into the e-text. It's the information we're able to investigate a lot more in the second round of surveys. And it really seems like a story of teachers and students getting more competency with them and getting more used to it, but still having places to go. Some teachers use it more than others. They're used pretty often in math class, and sometimes there's a mixed use of having text in the classroom and also using e-text, and that seems, students and teachers both seem to like that flexibility. Now, we met with a focus group of students, and this illuminates some of the data and allows us to get sort of a picture from some perspectives. It's very interesting with the early experience. I had a chance to go back and look at it, and they really identified the biggest problems in the very beginning part of the year. But once they got through the winter, things got a lot better for them. It's like teachers and students adapted to each other and kind of worked out a way to do the learning in a way that wasn't so they didn't have like adrenaline going all the time, just working on their system and giving them stress as much as they talked about earlier in the year. They averaged in the group, this is just a small group of about 10 to 11 students, they averaged about 3 hours a night on homework. And they developed better tools for coping with things. They got more sleep as the year went on.
Andy, what that is just, when I talk with kids, the 3 hours started out, but that was a lot of, they have a lot of freedom in school. They have, during the revision periods, maybe they'd rather play on Facebook or Tetris, as a couple of kids put it. They started to really be able to manage their time. One student in particular said that he says in middle school today he never has to do homework for STEM past 5 o'clock at night because he knows how to utilize his time. I mean, I told all the parents this young man made a commitment that every day before he left he had his math and English done because he did it during his free time where classes had a little bit of downtime. You know, you can capture about an hour during the day of downtime. So I mean that I think comes from a lot of. I don't think the number will be that high this year. I think the students are adapting and managing their time.
There's also a real coming into their own with project-based learning. One of the challenges they felt was you have all these different voices and everyone wants to be the leader. A lot of leadership at STEM Academy with the students, and they learn to not just push their way all the time. They learn how to be part of a group and solve problems. One comment, I put it up there, so I thought it was interesting. It doesn't seem like we are learning when we really are. So it sort of tells you a little about the transition. And they're not quite understanding, like their representations of what learning is a little more traditional. And they're not necessarily fully understanding that if you learn a project-based learning modality, that's learning on a different level or in a different way. So I think for teachers and students, there is some transition to that. It's extremely complex to teach in that way and to learn in that way. So honestly, I'm impressed at how fluent students and teachers are talking about it and how invested they are in making that kind of learning work. This is really interesting. Last time when we did the surveys in December, there seemed to be a lot of tension around with different high schools in STEM. And doing the survey and getting information in focus groups at the late springtime, there's a different story. There still is no bullying within STEM. I keep asking, no one will identify a bullying incident. It seems like it's a great environment for interaction with students. The path from STEM to West is less of a problem. Maybe administrators stepped up or students just think comments got old. There's not as much negativity between West and STEM students. There still is talk, but the tone has shifted from more negative stuff to kind of more banter or fooling around or what high school kids can do. I think there still are misperceptions about STEM in other schools, like the idea that STEM steals resources or has more things, or I mean, there are a lot of things that don't seem to be grounded in reality, but they don't seem as loud as they were from December. They seem like they're muted, and so I think people in this room and beyond did some work on that. Maybe adults stopped saying negative things, and kids lost interest as much. Maybe they're more used to STEM being there. The West athletes and band members are very accepted and don't report any kind of negativity between the two high schools. I think that's great. There are some negative outlier experiences. Incident with a bus driver and an SAT proctor that did some negative things towards STEM students or said negative things, and those are dealt with administration. Now, there was one incident that someone in the focus group talked about that administrators didn't know about, but that would be, I would classify that as an outlier incident. As an overall culture, you're getting progress on that issue. And I would not look to highlight any attention to that at all. Just let it be, and it's moving forward in the right direction. The students feel that the teachers love to be in STEM, they care, they're available, they're dedicated to student success. I asked a number of different ways to see, are there any criticisms you have of teachers? And this group wouldn't go there, and they seemed like they were comfortable talking about anything. So out of this small group of 10, I didn't get any outlier negative experiences with teachers. And there are a couple of things about e-text. I want to move a little faster through teachers and parents so we can do our small group thing. Teacher questions. Teachers scored very high in a lot of the categories. Here are some things that we can point out. Teachers feel safe and secure in school, and look at that. Look how high I enjoy teaching STEM Academy students. Teachers are really enthusiastic about teaching in STEM. Now, again, these are still very high, but relatively lower. Teachers regularly collaborate across disciplines and within disciplines. They do that, but I think if we investigate other sources of data, they want to do that more. Professional development activities are relevant and high quality. We got good responses on that, but we dig into it. There's a wanting for more differentiated or individualistic kinds of professional development. I don't really understand the selecting students. There's a selecting students, like STEM does a good job in selecting students. The application process is effective in selecting STEM students for STEM. I don't know what that means and why that's relatively lower. Maybe you did, if you want to explain it.
My belief in that is that as a school where effort creates intelligence, that we accept students of all varying ability, and then we ask all these students of varying ability to really step up and have a high amount of rigor. So from a teacher's point of view, they may feel, I don't know, or from an administrator's point of view as well, or from a kid's point of view, it could be that, well, maybe some of these kids don't belong, but the fact is that every one of them matter that belong. And that it's a process which has to be, while they all have the same classes, there needs to be differentiation. And we really have to find that piece that motivates them even more than they're motivated already. So I think that number will improve as we go. I think it's an idea that maybe it's the belief that STEM only has the best and the brightest of the schools, which I don't believe is true. I see grades of students before they came. We had a lot of students who had to work really, really hard. We have a lot of really good students too, a lot of well-behaved students who do what they're supposed to. But I think that process will become more effective as we go.
Yeah, you'd hope that there'd be students and teachers would conceptualize success for everyone and then mobilize to make that happen. So, all right, teacher question averages. The light green is from December. The dark green is from late spring. And you'll see really not much change. Look at, I didn't make a change thing. For technology smoothly, that went up. So teachers, the building issues and tech usage has gotten a lot better. Facilities got better. I think someone probably saw this temperature. Is that good now?
We'll see when it gets colder.
All right. Hopefully it'll be good. And things went up a little bit. The collaborate thing went down, and admin support went down, and administrative division went down, but they didn't go significantly down. They're still really high. Teacher comments, and Mark, feel free to jump in any of this, sir. There's a lot of energy in the teacher positive comments. Loving coming to work, the colleagues are great, the students are great, I can take risks in my classroom, I don't have to follow a script or do things like folks who came from other school districts hired into STEM were really it was just an awakening experience for them. They like project-based learning and the flexible design. Now, a lot of them talked about, well, we do collaborate, but it's not enough. We need to collaborate more within our disciplines. We need to collaborate more within our grade level, our teams, and that's really needed. If we're going to do this new kind of learning and teaching, we need time to share ideas and support each other and develop things. There were a lot of individual kind of comments, so it was very hard to get another theme coming out. I mean, some teachers were not happy with field trips, some were not happy with how clubs are working. Just a bunch of variation on that. Now, professional development, all the teachers wanted more on project-based learning. Not necessarily like an expert coming in on it, but maybe working with themselves and each other on that. They wanted more support for IB. I think some were apprehensive about this was done last spring, so IB stuff has started to happen this year. They're a little apprehensive about how's that going to work? Is that going to be all right? Technology, but the technology interests were very varied. And again, wanting more time for collaboration. So I think they really wanted to build capacity with each other. Very positive feelings. Some were concerned about the image of STEM as abused and wanted to fight that, like within the school, fighting against the students that might think that, or people outside of STEM. Now, in the focus group, they reflected on the year, and they talked about how much they worked. It was sort of a parallel story with students. Students and teachers worked really hard, and they learned how to be a little more balanced as they went through the year. I like the way many teachers talked about students and teachers have a shared responsibility to drive the learning, and that really developed with a project-based learning approach. Just looking at project-based learning, for a lot of them it changed their practice. For some of them, they had been used to that before, so it's just like, but they hadn't had a whole school be behind that. There was this tension between how much do we do individual work and how much do we do working groups. I think that's a good tension to look at to see where's the right balance. Like how do you have students represent things individually and how much do they collaborate? Now, there's one thing I want to point out on that. Teachers worried about managing 14 different directions in open-ended activity. That was a comment from one teacher. That reflects, like the previous thing we talked about, the challenges in adjusting to project-based learning and the kind of mindset that the teachers need to have to facilitate that. You're not so much having to do 14 different lesson plans, but rather you need to be in a kind of state of mind and framework where you can see where groups are and adjust to what's needed and to ask questions and to set things up so that learning can happen. It's more complex, it challenges teachers, it's hard for new teachers to do, and veteran teachers that aren't used to it, they can learn it quicker, but it's still really, really challenging. So it tells you that project-based learning is a process, and teachers need to have continual support to work on that. Another thing I thought was really interesting is the teachers reported how dramatically student writing improved, because students had to write in small groups, and they had their peers working with them on that, and from that process, they got less, like, you know how early high school kids, they overwrite things, or there's flowery language, or they're not quite concise. They really learned how to do that kind of professional, concise writing through having to write in groups. I thought that was great. And again, the theme of needing more collaboration, needing to build more coherence and big picture with the school. This is interesting. There was talking about how are we as STEM professionals. They were a little concerned about micromanaging that went on between leadership and them. They'd be told to like do this in this way, or you have professors all the time, but you need to assign a thing saying what you did and how you did it, and that it was very kind of task-oriented. And they wanted to move away from these kinds of templates and documenting, and they wanted more like independence to manage that time, and they can do that and then share their work publicly. So they wanted a different way from that. They wanted to learn more from each other. They felt that administration wasn't in their classrooms as much as they would have wanted for support for teaching. Someone made a comment, we're not the elite, we're to create the elite. And when we talked about this in the superintendent's cabinet, there was a very interesting dialogue, and it represents that there is sort of this, if you want to create elite kids, is there some, that's in itself an act of being elite. So that comment is a little ironic. And it shows that folks here and in other places, we need to really work on that. So I mean, Art's a driver of that as well. He's very strong about we're not better than other people. We're focused on learning and improving and getting ready for college, not to be better than anyone. I think that's important, and that's still an issue. And they wanted to know, how do we keep this thing going? Like, there's a lot, we worked really hard this year, can we keep it up? I think they're looking a little bit for administration within themselves and their students. Do you add teachers?
No, I think just the teachers, I see them every day, and they're working really, really hard, just like teachers do across the district. We're asking them to do something, to move out of their comfort zone, and they're really doing a great job of that. And there's struggles along the way, and I'm sure this year they will say that administration is their class plan. I'm sure that will probably be the case, but we're just going to keep plugging away and keep doing our best. And people who heard my middle school presentations, I finished those up today, and we're a different program, not a better or worse program. We're just different. We have different programs, different focuses. So that's what we are. We'll just move forward and try to improve it and make it the best program we can.
All right, so these parents, again, very high on a lot of these things. Look at the low one on the corner. It's like use own device. It's still in the positive range, but they're not that interested in that. So it helps Bucket STEM and the technology folks know you can have standardized technology in school. You don't need to allow people to bring their own tech. It's not that much of an issue. And basically, if you look at this, the scores are pretty high. I mean, the parents probably think the school's the cleanest of everyone, and it's a safe environment. I am kept informed about my students' progress, and I regularly check my students' progress online. They're kind of related to each other. So I guess parents are ranking themselves lower on checking up on their students. I thought that was interesting. Okay, so if you investigate a little bit of the comparisons between December data and late spring data, most of the categories saw a slight tick up. More sense of admin support. Now, there is a little bit lower blip for central support from maybe the school board or the central, I forget the exact wording of the question. So maybe there's a sense in the community that there's a disconnect between board support or central office support in STEM, or I think that's where like a lot of the disinformation can kind of play out. Maybe you have parents who didn't get kids into STEM, or some things, I don't really know exactly how that plays out, but it's still pretty high. It's just barely above 1. And overall, there's not significant change between the data on that. Parent comments, they love the college learning environment. They love that the school's challenging. There's a lot of individual praise for teachers. A lot of them talked about how project-based learning has been great. They talk about their students loving to go to school. Some of them made comments like, my student has never loved to go to school before, but does now. And those are kind of touching. They like the laptops. Challenges, there were a few specific comments about teachers that they felt like were not working well with their child or didn't support them or negative in some way. They wished like technology was managed better, that kids had to turn in work at different times, in different places, and it wasn't coherent. I think that's something you guys figured out mostly.
Not to interrupt, but they can turn it in until 11 or 12 o'clock at night. I've been parents for like, that's great.
Yeah, that's exactly along with those lines. Thank you, Jamie.
Well, they can also turn in at 7 o'clock at night.
Well, yeah, but when you give a kid a deadline at midnight,
Well,
they're
we're all
all
the
still
same way.
midnight.
Exactly. And we've talked about that.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of teachers pull back on that.
Yeah, the idea of like the kids will then stay up late.
Right, they'll stay up.
Yeah.
Can't.
There are some concerns with like sports and clubs and working that out. Some still see a lack of support from the school board. I mean, from the school board folks I've talked to, I don't see it. I see them being tremendously supportive. So something is something is happening where people are creating things maybe where it's not. So I mean, in terms of a recommendation, pay attention to how things are said at meetings, and people in the community might try to get you to say something negative, and don't even go there a little bit. Anyway, lots of comments about how great STEM is. There was apprehension about the new leadership. Hopefully that's not there anymore.
That's where I was at.
I mean, personally, I think Art's this is me stepping aside, he's doing a great job this year, and it's really exciting to see him work with teachers and other administrators there. That's my personal belief. Now, I do want to get us to do a small group activity, so I'm just going to move through this quickly. But we asked a question about the effort creates intelligence belief system that drives STEM. And teachers were they're pretty good at being able to talk about that and support that. Parents, even though there was no open-ended question on that, they did represent that in their surveys talking about that. So that's getting out to parents, which is significant. Students were really into that. There were a few that, their responses, a very small few, but they were really strongly not into that. They were like, effort creates intelligence. Well, I worked so hard and I got bad grades. What's up with that or something? So there were some questions that really, so that some students that didn't resonate with that. By asking that question, it was like poking the bear a little bit. So we took the questions and correlated them into topics, and this is basically how it played out across. You can see the teachers are in green, parents red, and students in blue. Most of the things track very well. Teachers tend to rank things higher than students and parents. You have that data there. And comparisons with grade and gender. And you see there are some differences, slight differences between 10th and 9th. We've talked about that before, how we need to pay a little more attention to our 9th graders. This slide right here lists many tensions, dilemmas, and contradictions that are raised from this program evaluation effort and are in a larger way connected to the work of STEM in the school district. We'll be looking at these questions in small groups in a very short time, so I'm not going to go over them so much right now. I have some recommendations, and I will do this pretty briefly. The transition we talked about, and that's being done at the high school. I have some suggestions for e-text, and basically continue in supporting students and teachers getting more comfortable with that. The tension with East and West, do not overcorrect. The issue is working itself out. 2 years from now, it might be a complete non-issue. Maybe a teacher or a student will say something they really shouldn't, but as long as there's a tone set and that doesn't get energy, and we don't give energy to something, I don't think there's going to be a big issue with that. And very important, the stress management, time management, wellness, executive functioning stuff, do not make a course for that, but integrate that to everything you're doing. So that gives it weight and importance, and that will help drive students to be more efficient and more healthy and other positive outcomes. I think you really need to work on finding ways to build more collaboration and different types of collaboration for your teachers. You can get them involved in teacher research or inquiry groups. I'm a big fan of such things. Getting peer coaching, visiting, going could be really great. In terms of professional environment, maybe you can talk about how you're doing that. Professionalism one, about how you're managing the teachers and the idea of instead of them making a little task, you micromanage them, you're supporting them as
Yeah, supporting teachers as professionals is really important. To be a basic expectation, be on time, do your job, and be honest. And when we go and we meet and we collaborate during faculty time, I think the number one thing that teachers do is they walk away with something that they can use in the class, something that makes their lives easier, and then they share that with us. So that way we know they're kind of on par and they have a self-check for themselves. So I think we use our faculty time very seriously. I don't do information dumps. There's a lot of data. There's a lot of questioning. And we bring up, this week I was bringing up concerns that I had in the junior class with the entire faculty. Just how can we address these things? Why are they important? Are they realistic? Are they real? So it's a program that's still growing. And so I guess what Andy's handing out here is or those questions, is that we're still developing the program for next year, trying to monitor on this year. So if you have ideas on those questions, of how the STEM staff can improve the situation, I would love to hear them, so that I can share that with my staff as we go back and we can really iron those out.
And before we do that, I'll tell you how we'll do that soon. There are a couple of program evaluation suggestions if you're going to continue this kind of work. I think you can create capacity for this kind of work among the students at STEM themselves. Like they can get support for how to do research and how to create surveys and ask questions and get data and then share them with each other and all of that. Students can take pictures and interview people and create movies to show the experience of STEM and investigate different things, and that could lead to a school that can look at itself and grow and develop maybe without the need of exterior program evaluators and things like that. And I have some ideas for Focus Shift that are up there. You have the information in your slides. Now, I passed out around the room a handout. I'll use this as an example. It goes back to these questions, and I basically took the ones under the first one. This question for this group is, what do students need for the world of work in college, and what are implications of this for teaching and learning? So in your small group, you would maybe address some of the issues involved with this question, and then develop ideas and action items that could be taken. So this is beyond just STEM, but it's sort of inspired from this work for us to think across the district. We're going to experiment and try this out. You can move towards, there's one there, one there, one there, and over there. Now the audience, any of you, can, if that's okay, can join a group. And if someone wants to join a big group at the front, a little small, you're welcome to go over there and do that. So take a few minutes, 5 minutes or 7 minutes, we end at 3:30, right? Yeah. So take about 5 minutes to try to quickly generate some ideas on this. We'll collect them and we'll post the responses so you can have that as well.
Okay. Yes, yes.
Teachers because,
So just pitch the bets, though. And I've had direct conversations with these teachers. So if they're declined, then the decision is easy. If they're accepted, they know that they still have the hour.
these are where the kids are, so what are you going to do with that? That's the
Yeah, right. The issues, don't put all your apples in one basket. Do you understand
But it's something close. But, yeah.
I don't know what the curriculum is right now. Is that part of their personality?
Yeah, there's teachers that we
Yeah.
shop. You know, it's like full
So then you are, so you become a target.
Oh, yeah.
No, I know.
Can everyone take one more sentence and finish what you say?
I think it's just in one together.
Okay, I want to do a very short closer. Thank you so much for listening and participating and sharing knowledge with each other. It was really interesting, and I really enjoyed hearing the kinds of conversations that were going on in small groups. Just to close, I think there are, at STEM and even beyond STEM, like doing this program, I got to see lights into other parts of the district. It's clear to me that there's so many good things that are happening, across the district, and there's wonderful people, great leaders, a lot of energy. I just encourage you to keep going and take the steps to raise it to a higher level. I can see this district act as an exemplar district, not just on a statewide level, on a national level. So these kinds of questions, keep asking them, generate your own, and do not be satisfied with just something that's good. I mean, make it great, make it transcendent. There's certainly the capacity here for that to happen, and I thank you for being part of that process.
Thank you, Andy and Art. Great. Yes, Mrs.
I just have one thing before are we done? Is that done?
Not over, so it's over.
Okay, and I believe it's a curriculum issue. Maybe I'm bringing it up in the wrong venue, but there's a lot of teachers here, so what the heck. The calendar for next year, we're working on, I'm sure, already.
Yes, we are.
It's the beginning of October, and now it's year 2. The one thing that I seem to hear from teachers and parents is the Friday of Labor Day weekend. That going the full 5 days, particularly for the younger students, they are completely wiped out and completely drained, and that Friday becomes a meltdown day, as opposed to a day of instruction. Now, I know everybody likes to get out early in June, and that's some of the driving force. I don't know if other teachers feel that way. I don't know if it's just my small sampling, but that Friday seems to really be a struggle. And I think most of the surrounding districts are still taking that Friday. Well, either they haven't started or they're taking that Friday. I mean, I don't think the IMA started yet. A lot of the other schools.
So, Mrs. Bertoni, if I could, since we already past time, Ms. Saxa will be working on the 13-14 district calendar, so she will bring that to BCC, a draft in November. So we'll have the opportunity then to talk about some of these suggestions of things we want to include or not include in next year's calendar. Because we're looking to have a board approval date in February. So
I
we'd
just
like
wanted
to
to
have
get
a
it out
couple of
there
months of discussion.
before I forget. Thank you.